Hi everyone. So today I'm going to be demonstrating new features available in our version 4 release of Simple GIS Server. In addition, I'll also be demonstrating some of the new features available in our GIS Admin Setup plugin extension for Simple GIS Client, which allows you to administer and publish data directly from within your Simple GIS Client application to a remote Simple GIS Server instance. So to begin with, for today's demonstration, I actually had spun up a remote server on an Amazon AWS EC2 instance, and that's currently what I have on my screen. I've actually remoted into that server, and so the first thing you would need to do is go ahead and install the Simple GIS Server application on your server machine. So the easiest way would be to simply go to the website and download the Simple GIS Server installer and install it on your server machine. However, depending upon whether you're using your own on-premise server or if you were using another hosted solution, there may be a couple of things you might need to take care of first. And so, for instance, on the Amazon EC2 instances, by default, they have enhanced protection enabled that limits your browser ability from a security standpoint, which would probably prevent you from downloading the installer directly. So to begin with, if you were installing this on an Amazon EC2 instance, for example, you would need to temporarily disable this protection to allow you to download the installer. And it's fairly easy to do. All you would do is underneath the Windows icon, and again this has to be a Windows server since that is what the Simple GIS products are compatible with. But on the Windows icon you would go to the Server Manager, and once the Server Manager opens you would go to your local server settings, and what you would look for is this IE Enhanced Security Configuration. And you just need to turn this off, and you just simply click on it. Right now you can see that it's on. When I click on it, I get the option for the Internet Explorer Enhanced Security to turn it off. And I just need to turn it off. Since I'm logged in as an administrator on the server at this point in time, I'm just going to turn it off just for the administrators. And again, this is just temporary so I can download the installer. So I'll click OK, and then I will close the Server Manager for now. And now what you would do is open up your Internet Explorer web browser, and then you would go to the www.simplegissoftware.com website. You would go to the Products menu, and then I would scroll down to the Simple GIS Server application and click on the Simple GIS Server details. And then what I want to do is just click on the try it free to download the installer. Since this will actually download the installer, and being a demo version, it's fully functional and it's free to use for 30 days. So go ahead and click that, and it brings you to the download page. And at this point in time, I can just click on Download Now. And now it's going to ask me, what do I want to run or save the Simple GIS Server setup. I'm actually just need to run it. So I'll click Run. It'll download the installer, do the security scan, and then it'll launch. So at this point in time, I just follow the prompts to install the Simple GIS Server. Go ahead and accept the license agreement. I'm going to accept the default installation directory and go ahead and allow it to create a desktop icon, and I'll go ahead now and install. When the installation excuse me, is finished, I'm going to leave this checkbox to go ahead and launch the server. I'll click Finish and give it a second, and you'll actually see the server application launch. To begin with, you'll get this registration dialog box since I have not registered the product for this machine. If you had a license key, you would enter it here for the activation code. If not, you can always buy a license key by clicking the Buy Now button. I'm just going to dismiss this dialog box for now. And I see that my server is up and running. So right now I'm going to go ahead and close my Internet Explorer. And I'm going to go back to my server manager. And I'm going to go ahead and turn the enhanced protection back on. So again, I'm going to go to the local server, go to the IE enhanced security configuration. I can see that it's currently turned off. Click on this and turn it back on. Then I'll simply close this box. So at this point in time, our server is up and running. By default, it's running on the local host, so we need to change that. And then I have no layers published, I have no WMS maps published, no tile mapping services, no tables. So everything is pretty much set in just a static default state with no real data that it's serving out at this point in time. So to begin with, one thing I need to change is the IP address to change it to match the actual IP address of my server for it to be listening for clients connecting and transferring data. So I simply go to my Windows Start menu. Under the Windows System folder, I'm going to go to a command prompt. And on this command prompt, once it opens in this DOS window, I just simply type ipconfig to get the IP address of my server. And so I'm just going to take this IP address. In this case, I'm just going to do a Control-C to copy that address. I'm going to come here to my server, under the server IP, highlight this IP address and do Control-V to paste in my server IP and hit enter. Now as I hit enter, you should see a couple of things here in the status box at the bottom of the server. You should see initially it was running on the local host and the TCP traffic. This is for the client server. Layers and tables that may be served out was listening on port 8080, and all HTTP traffic was on port 80. So as soon as I entered in the server IP address, I see that the server deactivated, and then it reestablished itself running on this IP address that I just pasted in. So now the server is set up for this IP address. So we're good there. One of the things that you may have, depending on whether you're using an on-premise server, you may be fine and not have to fool with this, but if you're using a hosted server like the Amazon EC2, a lot of times this server's IP won't match the public IP that people use to actually connect to your server. So the public IP is the IP address that outside internet traffic coming in through the Amazon infrastructure would connect to, that would then get routed to this server. And so really the only place you have to worry about that is on serving WMS maps, because web mapping services based upon the web mapping service specification, there is an XML capabilities document that specifies the URL for the different requests for getting these maps. And so if your public IP is different from your server IP address, you need to actually put in that public IP or DNS name here in this box. And for the Amazon EC2, if you go to your dashboard when you're launching your server instances, you can get your public DNS for your server instance off of that dashboard. Or if you've remote desktoped into your server, you can actually get it up here off your remote desktop window as well. So this is the actual DNS for this particular server here. And they normally all start for these EC2 instances, something like EC2 dash, and now I see I got an 18220. So what I would just need to do is simply type in this DNS address in where this public IP DNS edit box is. And then once I have that set, I'm just going to hit this Save Configuration button to make sure it saves this configuration information that I just entered. Now, one other thing I need to do, if I want to use the GIS admin plugin extension for Simple GIS Client, I need to first set up a user profile that will be used for this Simple GIS Client plugin to connect to, because you'll have to log in to be able to administer the server and publish data to it. And so where you would do that is underneath the Security Performance tab. So if I click on this tab, and I have a couple of settings here. I have this global server client credential setting. So this means if I publish any layers here as a client server layer, if I'm going to require anybody connecting to view that layer to log in, I would check this box. Otherwise, I can leave it unchecked, and anybody with Simple GIS Client connecting to this server could view those layers if I so chose to leave it that way. Also, if I'm not going to require a login, I can determine if anybody connecting to view the layers can also edit the layers. And so if I have this box checked, that means they can't edit the layers. If I am going to require a login for users to connect and view the layers, then their login credentials will determine whether they can edit or not. I have a similar setting for the WMS Web Mapping Service or the TMS Tile Mapping Service credential settings. I can require a login for anybody viewing any of our web mapping service maps or tile mapping service maps, or if I leave it unchecked, of course, then anybody with a URL can view the maps. But what I really need to do right now is I need to add at least one user with either publisher or administrator rights to be able to administer or publish data to this server instance. So I'm going to simply click here under username. Of course, you see I have no users listed, so I'm just going to add a user here. And for the rights on the drop-down list, I can have administrator, publisher, editor, or viewer rights. To be able to publish data, you would need at least publisher rights. To be able to administer any of the user information or login requirements, you would need administrator rights. An administrator can publish data, so if you have administrator rights, you can also publish data to this server instance. So once I've selected that, I also need to set the password for this user, so I click on Set Password, and then I just type in the password for this user, and then I need to retype it here, and then click Apply. And now I've added this user. Now there's one more thing that you may need to check depending upon your server setup before you can start using this server instance. And that is if your firewall is set up to block any of this internet traffic, you need to allow an exception to allow the Simple GIS server application to communicate through the firewall. So for the Amazon EC2 user, it uses under the Windows, it uses this Windows security settings. And if I click on that, what you want to do is go to the Firewall and Network Protection setting. And when you click on this, you come up to the Firewall and Network Protection. If you go towards the bottom, there's a link here that says Allow and Out through the Firewall. So if I click on this, I get this new dialog box that comes up. And these are all the allowed apps and features to communicate through the firewall. And of course, what we're looking for is the Simple GIS server, which is not listed. So what you would need to do is at the bottom, towards the bottom here, click on this button that says allow another out. And what you want to do is click on the browse button and navigate to where you installed the Simple GIS server, which in our case is underneath the program file Simple GIS server. And what you want to select is the Simple GIS server executable. So I would select that, click open, and then click add. And that adds it here into my allowed apps and features. And I want to allow access for the Simple GIS server to communicate through the private and public network. Once I've checked that, click OK. Close this. And now I am set to begin using this. And so what I'm going to do right quick, I want to copy my public DNS right quick so I don't have to retype that later. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, for now, just go out of the remote desktop to my server. And on my desktop machine, I actually have a Simple GIS client application that's running. And I've already installed the GIS server admin plugin. And if you ever need to check that, in your Simple GIS client application, you can simply come here underneath your file menu and go to plugins. And here's the list of available plugins. And what you're going to look for is a Simple GIS server admin plugin. And as I click on this, I notice that it is installed, and this is a free plugin for Simple GIS client. If it wasn't installed, you could simply go ahead and just click this button here to install it. But this is the plugin that allows us to manage our Simple GIS server from our remote Simple GIS client application. And so to begin with, to demonstrate, I have a shapefile loaded on here called properties. And on this shapefile, if I double click on it to bring up its layer properties, I have a custom form that I built for this particular shapefile. It has some fields and a radio button, and I also have a image viewer on here because I am referencing some photos that's linked into the shapefile. And I've actually saved this form design, so to use this in the remote Simple GIS server, I have to make sure I've saved my form. And you save your form and give it the same name as your shapefile. So in my case, my shapefile was properties.shape in the same folder, and I've named this form that I've saved is properties.frm, which stands for form. So I'm going to apply, click apply. And if I was to look at this shapefile and view its attribute data, so if I view feature data and click on this layer, of course I see here are the attributes displayed in that custom data form, and as I mentioned, I have these linked photos as well in this. So that just shows you what the shapefile is. But let's say now I wanted to publish this shapefile to my Simple GIS server so that it could serve it out as a client server for anybody that could connect to my Simple GIS server could read it. And in addition, I want it to have that same custom data form and with any linked documents such as the photos. So now I can do this directly from within my Simple GIS client application by coming to the File menu. And since I loaded the plugin, I'll have a new menu option called Administer Simple GIS Server. When I click on this, I get a new dialog box comes up. And this is where I need to enter in the public DNS for my EC2 instance. And then also in this case, because for my TCP IP traffic, my server is listening. If you remember when we looked under the remote desktop and looked at my server, it's listening on port 8080. So what I've done is just do the :8080 for the port number, and now when I click connect, I get the login box for me to log in. And this is why I had to set up a user to begin with on my Simple GIS server with the correct privileges to allow me to do this. So at this point, I'd give the username and the password. And if my login was successful, I would see that all of these different options now become available depending upon what I have access to do. Since my user was an administrator, I have access to all of this. So I could actually come to the login and user credentials. And at this point in time, I could change the global client server credential settings as well as the WMS TMS credential. I could also add users or remove users from this box as well. In this case, what I want to do is actually publish this shapefile that I just showed you. So I'm going to click on the publish layer. And now it gives me the list of available layers in my current map, which this is a tile mapping service layer here, the OpenStreetMap, which is just my base map. So really the only layer I have available to publish is my property shapefile. But I simply click on this layer, and these on the right hand side would be any layers that's already published in your server, at which I have none currently. So as I click on this, I click publish layer. If I wanted to add any descriptive information about the layer, I could type that in here and click apply. It now sent all the information related to that layer to my server, including the custom data form and the linked document. So now those photos that we were showing in our data form earlier have now been sent to the server and are saved on the server site and are hosted from the server. And so now I have this new layer available on my server. And I can demonstrate that if I click OK and dismiss this box now. And I'm going to remove my shapefile. And now I'm going to come here to my add layer. And instead of adding a shapefile or an image, I'm going to go to my Simple GIS Server Layers tab. Make sure that my server DNS is my EC2 instance, the public address for it, again with the correct port number that it's listening on, and click connect. Of course, this is the only layer that we have now. That's the one we just published, so I can select that and click add layer. I see that it added it to my table of contents. I'm going to close my dialog box, and it just added a default legend for it. If I turn it on, here are the two layers that we have. I could change this legend if I want it by double clicking on it and coming to the legend and changing it to whatever legend I want. This is the power of having these layers as a simple GIS client server layer. It allows you to serve this data out from a central location to multiple clients, but they all have the flexibility to treat this just like if they were looking at a local shapefile. So they could, query, you could change the legend on it, all of the things that you could do with a normal shapefile. And actually now if I was to view the attribute data on this layer, I was to click on one of these, I now see that I have the same form that I had designed originally with the data plus the photo. The difference is that unlike with the local shapefile, it was just reading my shapefile data off my local drive and the photo off of a local drive on my computer. It's now pulling this off of my server, so that if I had multiple clients on different machines connected to this server looking at this data, they would all be seeing the same data. And so that's one example of using this to publish layers, and that's a new feature, is allowing you to actually publish the layer along with the custom data form and any linked documents. And then the powerful thing too is I can edit this, as long as I have access, or if your global credentials are set up such that allows me to do it, I can come here and toggle edit on this just like I could on any particular layer that I could edit. And then if I was to come here and edit this feature, I could do it just like I would normally do. I could edit the vertex. I could click and drag to move this around, and I'm actually changing the data on the server itself. Also, if I was to link other documents into this or different photos, that would also get pushed back to the server as well. So that's the first example I wanted to demonstrate. The next example I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new project. And I'm just going to use the US boundaries template just as a quick demo. And let me, I'm going to remove the zip code boundary and the counties, and we're just going to use the state boundaries. So if I had a map such as this that I wanted to publish as a web mapping service that could be used by other third-party clients that support the web mapping service protocol, I could do that as well now, all from within my Simple GIS client application. So again, I would go underneath the File menu, go to Administer, Simple GIS Server, connect to my server, and enter in my login credentials. If my login was successful, now I'm going to go to Publish WMS. And when I click on this box, I get a new dialog box, and of course I have no web mapping services currently on my server. But if I wanted to publish my current map of what I have here with all of the legend settings and labels and everything as a web mapping service, I can simply click on this Publish Existing Map as WMS. I'll just give a name for my WMS service. Click OK. And now I see that it's in the process of uploading the data. And depending upon the size of the data, this may take a few minutes, or it could, if you're publishing very large data, it might take even hours. Just depends on your internet speed and the size of the data you're publishing. Once it's complete, I see now that I have a new published WMS map that's on my server, and I can actually view that as well by simply coming here. I'm going to turn this layer off for now. I'll leave it on in my map, but I'm just going to turn it off. And now I'm going to add a new layer, and it's going to be a WMS layer. Then I'm going to pull from my server. So I'm going to come here under the source URL. Oh, help if I could type correctly. And I will make sure I get the right DNS for my EC2 server and click Connect. And now I see these are my WMS maps that I have available, which is the state boundaries. I can select the image format I want, and actually I could also select what projection I want it in and click Apply. And now it has added my WMS layer to my map, and I can turn it on by clicking on the box next to it. And now I see that it's actually publishing this map from my server. And being a WMS layer, it actually, part of the WMS specification does support basic querying. So if I wanted to view the attribute data for these features, I could view my feature data tool and click on a particular state, and it would pull up that attribute information. So again, a quick way to enable you, once you have a map that you like, if you wanted to publish it as a WMS layer, to provide a broader range of support to other clients. So any, most common third-party GIS applications can read WMS, as well as a lot of the web-based Slippy Map libraries as well. And then finally, the other thing I'm going to demonstrate is, so that was a WMS layer, and I'm going to remove that for now. So I'm going to right-click on this layer and remove it from my map. Turn my state boundaries back on. Similar to a web mapping service is the tile mapping service. The biggest difference is the tile mapping service is pre-rendered map tiles, and typically, they perform much better or are much more scalable than the WMS, because instead of having to generate the map on the fly for each client request, these are actually pre-rendered map tiles that just get served out. And so they do provide much improved performance and scalability. However, they do take a while to generate the tiles depending upon the geographic extent of your data and the number of zoom levels that you're wanting to support. But if you do have data that you want to serve as a tile mapping service, I can do that as well. So I'm going to take this same state boundaries data set, and underneath my file I'm going to go back to my administer simple GIS server. I'm going to connect once again and log in. And now I'm going to publish as a TMS or tile mapping service. Now, when I get this dialog box, I'm going to click Publish Current Map as TMS. I'll give a name for this map, for this tile set that it's going to generate. And here I specify what the maximum zoom level and what the minimum zoom level is that I want to support for this particular tile set. So depending upon your geographic extent and what zoom levels you're wanting support, this can amount to quite a few tiles that have to be generated. So you can see here, based upon your selection, it tells you the total number of tiles that will need to be generated to cover your map. If you have a map with several layers in it and you want the extent to be based on one specific layer, you could just simply click on that layer in this list box that's presented down below. In this case, it doesn't really matter because I only have the single layer loaded in my map. But that way, if there was your extent you wanted to base upon a single layer, you could select that layer as well. So for this tile, I'm going to back down on these zoom levels. And you can see as I'm changing this, the number of tiles is changing. So for the purpose of the demo, I'm going to back this way down so we're not waiting for all these tiles to generate. And so I'll leave it set at 5 for now, 594 tiles. I'll leave the format as JPEG, and I'll go ahead and click Apply. What I do is actually uploading the data. And so it is now finished. And now you'll notice as I click on this, you'll also see the progress of the tile generation here. Now you can go ahead and dismiss this dialog box and leave if you wanted to before the tiles finished processing. That's fine. It's just giving you an indication of the processing of the tiles. In this case, it went pretty quickly because we only had 594 tiles to generate. And so now I'll demonstrate on this. I'll click Dismiss and Dismiss again. Again, I'll turn this layer off. And now I'm going to come back to my Add Layer, and I'm going to go to my WMS Layer tab and click Add and Configure WMS Layer. And now, instead of the WMS format, I'm going to go to the TMS tile set format. And if you're familiar with the tile mapping format, you have to give your DNS name for the path to your server and then the tile set name. And then the other parameters is this for the zoom level, the X and Y coordinates for the tiles as it breaks up these tiles in a set of grids. And now for this, for my zoom levels, my minimum was set at 0, but my maximum was at 5. So I'll back this down, and then I'll click Apply and close this, and then turn on my tile map. And now I see that my tile map is on. And so now I'm reading these tiles directly from my server based upon the tile set that it generated. And like I said, this you could also use in any web mapping libraries like Slippy Maps. And I can demonstrate that real quick. And I'm going to take a shortcut. I actually have one of the plugin extensions available for Simple GIS Client is our Simple GIS Collaborate, which allows you to generate a web mapping application based upon the leaflet Slippy Map libraries. And this allows you to use tile mapping services as a base map, as well as just generating additional, like if I had additional layers in, you could add in like JSON and what have you for a complete web mapping application. But just to show you how the Slippy Map works, I'm going to take a shortcut and I'm going to generate a web map application based on this current map. So I'm going to come here to my Simple GIS Collaborate menu and I'm going to select Publish Map to Web. I'll leave this set as my default web example. I'll leave all of that set. And what I will do is take some of this off. In my base map, I'm going to select this My TMS. And for my minimum zoom level, I'll leave it set to 0. And my maximum, I'm going to back that down to 5. And then I'll publish this web map. And now this is actually running within my browser. And so this is the Slippy Map that I'm seeing off of my server. And of course I can continue to zoom in until I get to that maximum zoom level that I supported. Remember, I stopped it at zoom level 5, so that's as close as I can get. But this just shows you, this is the using the leaflet library, my tile mapping service that's being served again from my EC2 instance on my Simple GIS server application here. And so I see now, if you remember earlier when I clicked on these tabs, they were empty, but now on my layers I have properties, which is the layer I published. I have a WMS map called US States, and then I have my tile mapping service called US States. And then here's all of my security settings. So this just kind of covers some of the new features. Hope this was useful for you. Also, if I was to shrink by closing my Simple GIS server, you'll see the form disappear, but it's actually still running. If you look into your system tray and you open up showing your hidden icons, you right click on it, you'll actually see this Simple GIS server icon. And you can always just right click on it and go to the configuration menu, and it'll bring this dialog box back up. So I hope this was useful. As always, if you do have questions and would like more information, please visit our website at www.simplegissoftware.com. Thank you.